At 8:47 on a cold Monday morning, inside a glass tower overlooking downtown Chicago, CEO Daniel Reed humiliated an elderly janitor in front of his entire executive team. Security was called. Employees stood frozen. The old man didn't raise his voice. He simply looked at Daniel and said, "You built this building, but I built the company." Then he handed over his badge. Daniel smirked and ordered him out. By the next morning, the boardroom doors were locked from the inside. Trading of company stock was temporarily halted. Lawyers rushed in. Daniel's access card failed. Because the man he had fired was the company's original founder, a majority shareholder who had quietly stepped away years earlier after building the business from a garage into a billion-dollar enterprise. By the time Daniel realized who he had just dismissed, it was already too late. How does a powerful CEO make a mistake like that? And what happened next would cost him everything. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Within hours of that firing, headlines began circulating across financial blogs and business networks, questioning how Titan Industrial stock could drop so sharply in a single afternoon. Traders watched the ticker slide as archived photos of the company's early days resurfaced online, including one image of a young mechanic standing inside a small Ohio garage in 1984, the year the company was founded. Employees started whispering about a quiet figure who used to walk those factory floors long before Daniel Reed ever stepped into a corner office. Who was the janitor really? Why would a founder who built a billion-dollar manufacturing empire choose to return in disguise? And how could one public act of arrogance threaten an executive career that took decades to build? To understand how this happened, we have to go back 40 years, to a time when the company had no investors, no skyscraper headquarters, and no polished boardroom speeches. Because this company wasn't built in a boardroom. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Long before Titan Industrial became a billion-dollar manufacturer, it began in 1984 inside a cramped Ohio garage, where Michael Carter, a former factory mechanic with no investors and a second mortgage on his home, worked 16-hour days assembling parts by hand. Newspaper archives from the late 80s show Carter shaking hands with his first 10 employees, men he later refused to lay off during the recession, even covering payroll from his personal savings. He believed loyalty built stronger foundations than capital, and when he eventually took the company public, he quietly kept controlling shares before stepping away from the spotlight. He often warned that the greatest threat to any company was arrogance. Decades later, Daniel Reed, an Ivy League graduate with a reputation for aggressive cost-cutting, focused on quarterly earnings, executive image, and shareholder applause, trimming benefits and rarely visiting the factory floor. One man built a legacy through humility, the other measured success in numbers. And then the founder decided to return without telling anyone. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Weeks after quietly re-entering the company he built, Michael Carter traded his tailored suits for a janitor's uniform and began working night shifts inside Titan Industrial's headquarters. Moving unnoticed through hallways he once designed, he listened as employees spoke in hushed tones about benefit cuts and sudden layoffs. He watched supervisors pressure managers to hit quarterly targets at any cost. Fear had replaced the loyalty he once protected. Each morning, Daniel Reed passed him without a glance. One afternoon, spotting him near the executive corridor, Daniel snapped that maintenance staff had no business near leadership offices. The breaking point came during a tense boardroom meeting over a minor earnings miss. Frustrated, Daniel stormed into the hallway, saw the janitor, and publicly blamed low-level incompetence for the company's decline. "If you can't even clean properly, you're useless here," he said, calling security as employees stood silent. Michael replied calmly, "You don't recognize the foundation you're standing on." Daniel laughed and fired him, unaware that terminating that janitor required a shareholder vote. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. By sunrise the next morning, Titan Industrial's board convened an emergency call after overnight volatility triggered internal alerts. When the main screen flickered on, the janitor they had seen escorted out hours earlier appeared seated in a quiet office, introducing himself as Michael Carter, founder and controlling shareholder. Legal counsel displayed documents confirming his voting power and long-standing majority rights retained since the company went public decades earlier. Faces around the table tightened as Daniel Reed attempted to assert executive authority, only to be reminded that shareholder control outweighed his title. Carter then outlined months of documented observations, declining employee morale, internal reports warning of cultural deterioration, aggressive cost-cutting that prioritized short-term earnings over long-term stability, and compensation packages that widen the gap between leadership and factory workers. Within hours, investors reacted sharply, sending the stock downward as financial networks ran headlines reading CEO under fire, founder returns, and corporate coup. Daniel's confidence began to fracture, yet the decisive strike was still ahead. But the real blow hadn't landed yet. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. 17 minutes into the crisis meeting, Michael Carter exercised the authority he had quietly retained for decades and called for a formal vote, invoking the same shareholder protections that once helped him secure early investors when Titan Industrial first entered the public markets. The board, facing mounting losses and documented evidence of internal decline, sided with the founder. Effective immediately, Daniel Reed was removed as chief executive. Within the hour, security escorted him through the same hallway where he had ordered the elderly janitor out just the day before. Employees gathered again, but this time there was no silence rooted in fear. There was recognition. Carter then walked slowly across the factory floor and into the lobby, no longer in a maintenance uniform, but acknowledged openly as the company's owner. Decades after building the business from a garage, he had reclaimed it without raising his voice. Authority had shifted, and everyone in that building understood why. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Power had shifted, but what happened next surprised even the board. Michael Carter declined the offer to return as permanent chief executive, explaining that his purpose was never to reclaim a title but to restore direction. Instead, he appointed Thomas Grant, a longtime operations manager who had started on the factory floor 3 decades earlier, to lead the company forward. In the same announcement, Carter reinstated employee benefits that had been cut, introduced a profit-sharing structure modeled after early American manufacturing firms that rewarded loyalty, and committed to rebuilding internal culture before chasing quarterly records. Investors listened carefully, aware that long-term stability often outperforms short-term gains. The final truth was simple. Carter had not returned for revenge. He returned for evidence. He needed the board to see what unchecked ego could cost. As he once said, a company's strength isn't measured in stock price, but in how it treats the people who clean its floors. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. In the end, the glass tower still stands. The markets still fluctuate, and Titan Industrial continues operating, but the question lingers long after the headlines fade. Would you have recognized him if you passed him in the hallway, or would you have seen only a uniform and a title beneath yours? History shows that many American corporations have risen and fallen not because of competition, but because leadership lost sight of the people who built the foundation. So tell me in the comments, was the CEO wrong? Or was he simply doing what modern executives are trained to do? And is arrogance the greatest threat to leadership when power goes unchecked? If you think this story was shocking, wait until you hear about the executive who fired his entire team and what they did next. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Subscribe for more real corporate power stories.